Why, hello. It's time once again for my annual best books of the year. And I'm just going to go through all the books that I read this year. No, that's not true. I'm going to pick the ones that I keep a track. I'm going to look, I'm looking at this. And the ones that I gave 4 or 5 stars, those are the ones I'm going to talk about. The other ones, I'm not going to talk about. Let's start with the first one, whatever that is. Let's see. Oh, the first one that comes up, How Apprope, is it's this combined volume of A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, Dubliners. I think I've talked enough about James Joyce this year, so I'm just going to say I read it or reread it and I moved on from it. The end. So, yeah, I gave that 4 stars. Okay, you're going to think it's all James Joyce. Then I also read Stephen Hero. I gave that 4 stars. And once again, I'm going to skip over that and not really talk about it because I've talked way too much about James Joyce this year. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go look at my playlists and you'll know what I'm talking about. All right, the first non-James Joyce book that comes up. I've been reading through these Carl Barks, Donald Duck, and Scrooge comics. Carl Barks, if you don't know, he wrote and drew like, I don't know, 5 or 6,000 pages of Disney comics. He was out of control in like the 50s. And they're really good. They're definitive. A lot of the stories from the original DuckTales cartoons comes from Carl Barks. So the one that I read, it was the 7 Cities of Gold, but they're all pretty great, and I plan to read them all at some point. Let's move on. And once again, another one, similar vein. I read another Crazy and Ignatz volume, one of my all-time favorite comics, possibly my all-time favorite comic strip. Nancy by Ernie Bushmiller is also pretty great, but I got through another one of those volumes, A Kind, Benevolent, and Amiable Brick. I cannot praise and recommend George Herriman enough. He gets 5 stars for that. Switching into the music book vein, I discovered this keyboard lesson Goldmine series, and I've been slowly making my way through the blues volume. It's really great book, but some of it's very challenging, so I haven't totally finished it, but I give that 5 stars. It was just amazing. If you're at least an intermediate piano player, I recommend it. I read some children's books about Finn McCool, the mythical Irish hero, and I guess the one that I liked the most was called Finn McCool and the Great Fish. I think it had good pictures. Moving along, a lot of 3-star books. I read this book, kind of a memoir, but also a self-help book by this guy named Stephenson, who's really an amazing guy. Actually, I didn't read the book. I listened to the audiobook. I listened to it twice because it was so amazing. So you should check it out. It's called Get Off Your Butt. Some of these keyboard style series, Back to Music, by Hal Leonard puts out. There's one on country piano. I gave it 4 stars. Not because I don't like country, but because I feel like some of the other ones are even better. But it's pretty great. All of them have been pretty good at least. So check those out if you play piano. I got through the first Green Lantern book by Grant Morrison. I've been reading Grant Morrison since at least 25 years. And some of his more recent stuff is mixed. I think he kind of peaked around late 90s, early 2000s. But there's still some nostalgia in reading him. And he still does some great things. So I did enjoy this Green Lantern volume. I'm looking forward to future volumes. The art is pretty... It's pretty exaggerated. It's not what I would say my ideal art style, but I enjoyed it, and I will read more of it. So you may like it too if you like science fiction, that kind of thing. I don't read a lot of superhero comics anymore, so when I do find one that I like it, and this one I liked. Okay, I reread this book, Masks of the Illuminati. I already talked about it somewhere else, but it's a pretty good standalone volume for Robert Anton Wilson. I'd been wanting to reread some of his stuff, and it's one of the better ones. I picked it specifically because James Joyce is a character, and I've been talking about James Joyce all year in this Ulysses series, but it's a good book. It stands alone, and we'll introduce you to James Joyce if you don't know him. Next book was this really fat collection, this Animal Man Omnibus, another superhero comic by Grant Morrison. This one is much earlier, though. It's one of his first, maybe his first work for DC, and it's pretty good. I think I read it really fast in just like several days, and maybe that wasn't how it's meant to be read, but it does have some cool time travel ideas and postmodernism, etc. So maybe that's your thing, so check it out. Another Hal Leonard book, Stride and Swing Piano. I like this one even more, and I'm still slowly trickling my way through it because there's so much to learn, and there's stuff on ragtime, on boogie woogie. It's great, and I will be studying it for many, many months and maybe years. I think it's very challenging and fun. Don Juan by Lord Byron, and yes, that is the pronunciation, I'm told, for Don Juan in England at the time. They even pronounced things like Don Quixote as Don Quixote, something like that, because they used like English pronunciation. But Don Juan is this long epic poem, unfinished, but at the time of Byron's death. And it's the longest thing I've ever read by Byron, certainly. And I really enjoyed parts of it. So I gave that 5 stars. I'm also reading through this other collection of Byron's poems, but I haven't finished that yet, so I don't know what I'm going to think about it. Moving on. My first book by this comic artist, Moo Stuart, and it's called Anthology of Mind. Very abstract, very avant-garde. I enjoyed it. I'm going to read more by this guy. Yeah. There was an essay at the end of the book. I don't know if I really liked that. It was a little pretentious and a little unnecessary, but the comics I thought were some really interesting stuff. If you like kind of experimental Fantagraphics type stuff, then that is a book for you, perhaps. Moving on. I read this Autobahn biography. This Autobahn biography, yeah, by I don't know who the guys were. It's these French guys. They translated it. There's a writer and an artist or something. But the book was called Autobahn on the Wings of the World. I knew zero about John James Autobahn. Is that his full name? He has different names. He's a interesting guy. You should learn about him too if you like nature and birds and stuff. I learned that he killed a lot of birds. It's kind of ironic considering he's sort of a poster child for the conservation movement. Moving on. Oh, I read another Jesse Jacobs book. This guy, one of my favorite comics people. The book is called By This You Shall Know Him. It deals with mythology and other stuff. And I think all of his books have been great. I don't remember the other one, the titles, but Safari, Honeymoon Safari, and I don't remember the third one. He has another one. But all of them I have enjoyed, and he's a guy that I will seek out any book that he releases. He's that great. Moving on. I read this new Chris Ware book, pretty long, and he's been working on it for decades. It's called Rusty Brown. And I have mixed feelings about Chris Ware. He's like the Radiohead of comics. He's so depressing and just such a downer. But when he does amazing stuff, it's pretty amazing. So I feel like compelled to read his stuff, but I can only take so much at a time. This one, though, had some pretty neat moments. This is one of the best by him, I'd say. I think I enjoyed this definitely more than Jimmy Corrigan. I think my favorite book by him, though, is that, what's it called? Quimby the Mouse, I think is the title. I think that's my favorite because it seems similar to George Herriman. And George Herriman is not a downer. He's just wonderful. And Chris Ware is not like that. But you may like Rusty Brown. You may not. It's very Midwest, very bleak winter type thing. But I don't know. If you like Chris Ware, then you should certainly seek it out. I'm going to go to the next book, which was this Aldous Huxley book. I audiobooked this. It's called The Perennial Philosophy. It is about the common threads in world philosophies, world religions, as perceived by Aldous Huxley. It's an anthology that contains a lot of excerpts, and I enjoyed it. Yeah. It probably connects to. I did a book review on Ken Wilber's work, and there's certainly connections. He refers to the Perennial Philosophy a lot. But yeah, I would say this is one of the better Aldous Huxley books that I've gone through. I read through this collection of sonnets by Jorge Luis Borges. The Penguin edition is dual language, so on one page there's English and on the other page there's Spanish. I was trying to work on my Spanish. It's pretty hard Spanish though. It's Argentinian Spanish and not the easiest, but I enjoyed it. Yeah, Borges is amazing. I always enjoy his books, but I think up to this point I'd mainly just read his stories, and this is the first exposure I had to his poems, and he, I guess, primarily considered himself a poet, not a storyteller. I mean, not a prose fiction storyteller. So if you like poems, if you like Spanish, that may be the book for you. I'm getting pretty near the end of the year, actually. There's a lot of 3-star books. I'm not even going to mention them. I guess my last book for the year is this book called High Weirdness, Drugs, Esoterica, and the Visionary Experience in the 70s. This book really focuses on 3 authors. They are Terence McKenna, Philip K. Dick, and Robert Anton Wilson. 3 authors who had a huge influence on me. So this book was almost written just for me. And I had a lot of very aha moments, a lot of insight into these authors that I didn't know about. And this author, Eric Davis, I've read his other book, Technosis, also really good. I read it like 20 years ago, so I don't think I've read anything else by him since then. And I have to say that this book, for all its wonderful moments, the style was very academic. So if that's not your thing, a bunch of footnotes and I don't have the book right now anymore, but it's, if I picked a random sentence, it's just so full of all these, like, terms that would, if you don't like really convoluted and thick sentences, this is not the book for you. But if you can swim through that and cut a path through this book, and you know these authors, because if you don't know these authors, don't read this book. Read their books first. But if you do know these authors, if you're curious to learn more about them and get some insight in how they relate to this hallucinogenic modern world that we find ourselves in, then this may be the book for you. It was pretty good. I gave it 4 stars. And with that, we're at the end of 2019, and I'm probably not going to finish any more books in the next 2 days, 3 days, however many days we have remaining in this year. I just wanted to share my favorite books, and I wish you a wonderful 2020 and some wonderful book reading experiences, perhaps some of these that I've mentioned. Good night, and God bless you.